Good morning. I hope you guys have been enjoying this year's festival as much as I have. It has been absolutely incredible. And I feel so privileged today to be able to introduce Christy Cashman, author of The Truth About Horses, and her interviewer, the talented actress Jane Seymour. Christy Cashman is an Emmy Award-winning actress, accomplished film producer, passionate philanthropist, and now an accomplished writer. Jane Seymour has won multiple Emmys, is a Golden Globe winner, who is also a recipient of the Officer of British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. And in my opinion, an absolute icon. Wow, what a lineup. The Truth About Horses is not just a book for people that love horses, but an emotional coming-of-age story that we can all relate to. We are thrilled to have them both at the Nantucket Book Festival, so thank you all for making your way to our little island, and I'll turn it over to you, Jane.
Thank you so much. Well, I suppose the first question, the literal elephant in the room, is why am I here? Because,
we love you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, as an actress, quite often people hand you their book and says, will you write a blurb? And you go like, ah. That happens a lot. And I had the opportunity of meeting Christy when I was doing my series, Harry Wild, in which, of course, I'm playing a literature professor, that's a tie-in, who quits and becomes a private detective. I was way too busy to read the 15-pound, yet unpublished book.
It was a manuscript, so it was bound, but it wasn't, you know, it was like from a printer, basically.
It was heavy, but it had great usage when I was there in Dublin, because every time I had to do a Zoom, it raised my computer. And I'm very honest, so as I'm packing up and still hadn't read it, I said, Christy, what can I do? And she mercifully got me a digital one. I read it, I fell in love with it, I could not believe how extraordinary it was. And I thought, oh my gosh, it sat there and I didn't read it, and now I have, and she was just so humble about it. Anyway, that's how we met, and we'll go further. So, yeah?
Well, I just want to say that from my perspective, what happened was I have a mentorship program that I started called You Think, and it's a mentorship program for kids who are interested in the arts, and it's a 3-day immersive experience for them to explore anything in the arts that they might want to do. And an actor who is one of our directors and teachers for the kids, he said, you know, I just did a scene on Harry Wild with Jane Seymour. And I said, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And he said, I actually asked her to come to the program and meet the kids and meet you. He said, I thought you guys should meet, and I thought, why not ask her? And his name's Alan Devine, and I will forever be grateful to Alan, because he just thought maybe she would come. And when he told me, I thought, I didn't believe him. I said, well, that's nice, but she doesn't know me, she doesn't know anything about me. And the reason she came was because she knew that it would be important to meet the kids. And so she said yes. And that's part of who Jane is, and is always open to doing things that, even though it might be outside of her comfort zone, even though she doesn't necessarily know what she's going into, she said yes. And that started what was then our friendship that turned into, after she read my book, then a relationship, an adventure going forward with producing together.
So I'm very excited about that. And when I asked my lawyer to come up with, you know, what the deal would be, he actually read the book. And then he said to me, I read the book. I said, yes. And he said, I cried. He said, I'm a lawyer. Lawyers don't cry. I cried. That was pretty much his delivery. And it was at that moment that, very excitedly, I rang up Christy. I said, we have a deal. And my lawyer, who's a man in his 60s or 70s, very dry lawyer who's done every movie deal out there, was so impacted by this. I said, this is not a YR novel. This is a novel for everyone. This is impacting so many different people on so many levels. So I want to ask you, the book, it delves into themes of resilience, family, and healing. What inspired you to write it?
Well, of course, I've been asked this question a few times, and it changes a little bit, but I think the answer that I'm most comfortable with, and the one that feels most right, is that I think I was trying to, as an artist, trying to express how I felt about loss. I lost my mother when I was 17, and yearning for being able to go back in time to a place where things were okay, where you didn't feel like before your life got a little turned upside down. And also feeling somewhat emotionally abandoned, because once tragedy strikes, you're kind of like on your own emotionally. You might have people around you who are helping, but it's pretty lonely because you're processing it all on your own. And I think that what I really wanted to do was write something that resonated the fact that you could feel tragedy on one hand, but also have joyful and beautiful moments on the other hand, and that you have to be able in life to hold both at the same time. And it's bitter, it's that bittersweet feeling of what this life is all about and our existence that has a big question mark out there for all of us. And I think that the wild horses in it that she sees, that maybe other people see, maybe they don't, is also representative of that other thing that comes into play in our life that isn't just about the physical world.
So true. And whether you've ever been around horses or you haven't, when you read this book, you smell the barn, you smell the leather, you feel an attachment to these horses on a very amazing, extraordinary level. How has your experience of being around horses, I mean, tell us about that and how that impacted this novel and how important that is to you.
I was in love with horses the moment I saw them. And we had 2 ponies and 2 horses when I was growing up in Ohio. We moved to North Carolina when I was 7, and we brought our quarter horse mare with us, whose name was Mary. We brought her with us, and we kept her at a quarter horse farm a few miles from our house. And somehow, I mean, my parents aren't really horse people at all, but somehow my dad thought it was a good idea to breed Mary to the stud there, whose name was Moneymaker, who was Mary and Moneymaker did a thing, and he was actually a really well-bred quarter horse, as was Mary. So anyway, the foal, I think I just begged enough that I said, can I have the foal? Can he be mine? And there were, I guess my parents just went along with it, because I just assumed he was mine and I would take care of him. And that, I was 9 years old. And so I knew nothing about raising a horse. We learned together. And I think that I learned so much about raising him and realizing that even though I had an idea of how things would go in training him and breaking him, and even just getting him to lead on a halter, and do like the basic things like let me brush him and that kind of thing, I realized that there was a lot of frustration involved, because he had a mind of his own, and he often, would do exactly what he wasn't supposed to do. And so I think that I learned how to be frustrated and still keep going, at a really young age, and also learned how to be patient, that a lot of training a horse isn't forcing them to do what you want, but letting them believe that it's their idea, you know? And so that was a lot of a huge learning experience. I think it put a framework around, it's like a classroom, you know, anytime you take something and take it on, it can become a classroom for so many other things.
So Reese is your protagonist. She's a 14-year-old girl, and she goes through enormous challenges. What is the takeaway message that you want the readers to get from Reese's experience?
I think it's about what I was saying earlier about being able to recognize that life is both, you know, can be both very sad and tragic and disappointing and all those things, but also very beautiful.
Well, also, you know, a very big part is in all these amazing relationships that she has along the way, including the fact that she pretty much almost loses her father, having lost her mother. I mean, I think that is a huge element in this book. I think it's a big one for me. You know, I could see, you know, this man who'd lost his wife and had to give everything up, trying to have a new life and not being able to really understand the needs of his daughter. I think that's a very big part of this book. And tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I think the dad represents that person who tries to patch things together on the outside to make it look like everything is okay. You know, let's just get another woman in here, you know, let's just get another family real quick, and then we can go on and move off of this thing, you know. And I think he was trying. I think that was his, you know, effort to try to make things okay after the tragic loss of her mother. But Reese, you know, you can't really do that honestly. You know, you have to do the work inside after such a tragic loss. I think that the work inside is what Reese was recognizing that her dad was ignoring, and therefore she felt ignored. And, you know, there's this great line, which is, you know, you can be alone with someone. You can feel more lonely with someone who really isn't taking you in than you are if they weren't even there, you know? So she kind of realized that the loss of her mother was in some ways easier. I wouldn't say necessarily easier, but compared to somebody who's there and not really there emotionally.
Tell us about the mystical element of the horses that only she sees.
Well, there is somebody else who sees them.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I love books with magical realism. You know, I love books that are grounded in reality, but have an element of magical realism that allows you to say or believe that there is this other realm, there is this other thing that's beyond the physical world. And even if we're only seeing snippets of it, you know, even if we're only seeing these tiny little glimpses of whatever this world is about, it's, I guess, it was my attempt to offer that in a book that was grounded in a real world with real loss, with real feelings, with everything else, you know, that I think is somewhat universal.
One of my favorite characters, too, is the selective mute, the Native American. What I really loved about that was that in the narrative, she basically is talking to herself, which if she was going to a good therapist, she'd be doing that anyway. So he basically becomes a way for her to hear what she's trying to express, that she feels she's not being heard. Would that be correct? Tell us about why the selective mute. How did that come about?
Well, there was someone in my hometown who was a selective mute. I was just always very curious about him. Like, we all knew that he could actually speak, but he chose not to. And we were all I just remember being just, he was accepted. It wasn't as if he, he was off on his own. I mean, he was in the classroom with us. He was, I forget if he played sports. I don't think he did, but I just remember thinking all the time, whatever happened to him? What made him choose not to speak? And I guess typically it is something tragic that someone experiences, and then it's a choice not to express themselves. And I don't know all that much about it, to be honest. I did some research as I was, I didn't even know it was called a selective mute when I started writing about him. Someone in my class told me, he was like, "Oh, that's called a selective mute." So I just found it really interesting in a character, and I also realized shortly after making that choice that I was painting myself in a corner somewhat, because you have to do a lot more writing when you're describing someone who, how else do they communicate, and what is it that they do? And I found that to be a fun challenge, actually. I thought, any writing, I think, that anyone does should feel like a challenge. It shouldn't feel easy, and this was definitely not easy. It took me 9 years to write my book, but I always say, well, I wasn't writing the whole time. I was working on other things. I had a lot of stuff going on that internally that was like, well, can I really do this? Doubting myself, wondering if I was really a writer, and all of that. And luckily, I think that what I did was I continued the process by just doing the work, by sitting down and doing the work, even when I didn't feel like it. I think that was the key to, to getting the book done. But Wes's character definitely got me in the weeds a little bit, and he was somebody who I had to really think about a lot and meditate on and pray about, and what is he trying to say? What is his story? And he has a whole backstory, and I wrote a lot that didn't end up in the book. Thank God, the book would have been like 100 pounds instead of 50 pounds. He was just interesting to me, and I just, I did what I think writers have to do. They have to figure out what was his story and what did he do and how did he end up this way.
I think one of the extraordinary things also about the book is, well, obviously you've had incredible response from major writers. That's amazing. And I don't know if you know, but she won 3 Ben Franklin Awards, 3 categories. Oh, and it was #1 on Amazon when it came out, just, to mention that too. And now, we're taking it out and trying to see what we can do with it cinematically. But it gets such a strong response from people, and people of all ages and people of all types. I mean, how does that feel for you? Did you think it would resonate with such a wide audience when you were writing it?
Yes.
Of course you did.
Actually, if I really think about it, yes. I mean, I knew that I was writing a story with a point of view from a protagonist who was 14, but I also knew that it was a universal story because it's about a relationship, and about a relationship after tragedy where everybody does the wrong thing, and everyone is emotionally on their own, or each character is on their own road, and they have to navigate back to each other. And, I mean, I don't want to say too much because I want you all to read the book, but, so that's the part. I think everyone has felt emotionally alone. I think everyone has experienced loss. I think everyone has experienced longing. And I just planted it in a world that I could write well about, which is the horse world and barns and livestock. There's a line in the book that I love that I got from, someone a long time ago: where there's livestock, there's dead stock. And, and it's part of life on a farm. It's part of life with animals. And the being in, in the barn atmosphere, and early mornings with the feeding. I loved writing about that, and how anxious everyone is, and how the barn smells when you first walk in the morning, and then the evening it's a little more peaceful, and the munching of the hay, and all of that is just like, that was low-hanging fruit for me, that was easy for me. But the stuff about how to tie in the emotional stuff and who was the dad, I didn't want him to be a bad guy, I just wanted him to be a confused guy, and I didn't want Reese to be a total asshole. I wanted her to be in pain, and that's how she expressed herself, by being angry and again, not doing the right thing.
So in the society we're living in today, and young people who live on cellular things, on their phones and God knows what, do you feel that this is a book that will help a lot of people who are very lost right now, especially the youth of today, with the sort of the instant, but at the same time distant relationships that they are trying to figure out?
I think that's more of a question for you. You're the one that optioned the book.
Well, it was interesting. You were just saying earlier that you had to, cut out more about Wes and cut out this and that. And I told you early on that this was more than just a movie. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're discovering now is it's really a series. Mm-hmm. Because there are so many rich characters, and some of which she just touched on. But you can just go down their story, and you've got another book in itself. So there are so many amazing characters and scenarios, and I just felt so strongly about it. When I read it another time, I was on an airplane going to New York, I think, when we were launching. And I thought, well, I've got to refresh myself, so I'm really on it. And I'm reading it, and I couldn't put it down in the airplane. And they have these little coasters, for your water or wine or whatever it is. And I was like mopping up underneath my reading glasses. Everyone in the cabin thought I was having a nervous breakdown. The flight attendants then had to know what the name of the book was, because they like to read, and clearly this book had an impact. And so it was then and there that I said, Christy, I have to be part of this ride, because it's just so profound to me. And I also tested it out on my 10-year-old granddaughter, who's a great reader. And she didn't just read it once, she read it 4 times, and then started telling me what she wanted to know more about. There's a character in it, a young blind girl. And my granddaughter, Willa, said, I want to know more about this blind girl. So really, I think what's very exciting is what we're doing now. We've got people who are interested in this as a movie and or as a long form. But I think the real, icing on the cake would be to take what is a remarkable book and turn it into a world that people want to live in terms of an ongoing series. So that is the dream, and that's what you're working on right now, right?
I'll clap for that.
Actually, remember though, Jane, that part of the reason she was able to take the time and do the launch with me and everything, and go around attached at the hip basically for a while, is because the strike happened. And in some ways, timing is everything. And we've had this, sort of magical element that has taken the book and us and what we're doing and been part of it. So there's a lot of that. We see that all the time.
I mean, to me, it's the magical horses, the mystical horses is what's really happened as to how and why you and I ever met, which was amazing. It was unlikely at that time because I was working so hard.
It was unlikely that you said yes. You knew nothing. That's where it started. And her theme of her whole life is open hearts. That's the name of her foundation. But that's who you are.
And you.
open heart, and I think that's why the book touched you, because in order to sort of take on a lot of the emotional stuff in it, you do have to kind of open your heart. And I think that's why we read books, because it's a safe place to do that, to feel the emotion, whereas our real life is a little too scary and too raw and too, too much. It's a lot. Life's a lot. And yet we can read a book and kind of feel safe in having a real kind of roller coaster of emotions. I think that's a job as a writer, to explore as many emotions, or allow your reader to explore as many emotions as they can within that time frame.
And of course, both of us come from film and television anyway as well. So, to actually broaden this out, not just have it in the reader's imagination, but actually visually see South Dakota, to see, this whole world, and to broaden the story too, I think is very exciting. As you said, I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone because of the strike, but there was a loophole. I was allowed to talk about someone else's book.
Yeah.
So all these networks were, chafing at the bit, trying to get a celebrity to talk about anything, and they couldn't, but they got me.
Yeah.
And then the byproduct was it went to #1 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yep, and which was kind of cool too.
It was amazing.
We've had a lot of happy dances. I just believe that in life, for me, it's always when I'm not looking for something that something amazing happened. Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman was a complete accident. I was at the lowest ebb of my life. I was about to be pretty much homeless and everything. And it's a long story. This is not about my story. But literally, like manna from heaven, I was given this little thing that was never supposed to be a series. It was supposed to be a one-off movie. And it's still playing in 98 countries. It impacted me when I read that the same way that when I read The Truth About Horses. Had the same feeling when I read Somewhere in Time. I had that feeling. So when I get that feeling and I can't let go of it, and it grows and grows with me, I know it's a hit.
Well, that's amazing.
So do we ask some questions? Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes,
Okay.
I see one here. Okay. Oh, here comes the microphone.
You wrote the book, like who was the spot on, like who was the main character, and like why did you put the main character on the spot like that?
Why did I choose a 14-year-old girl? Because of my vocabulary. No.
14-year-olds
really.
are cool.
Yeah. No, not really. That's just the voice that came to me. I mean, I wanted her to be, because when I was the age of Reese was when I was, not a little girl and not yet a woman. I was in between, and I find that in between stage to be very interesting. And I also find it to be interesting when you're dealt with a big issue like loss, like a serious loss in your life, and how it changes the trajectory of your life, and how she was doing her best, and she had to be true to herself, and in some ways express her anger about her situation, but not necessarily do it in she didn't necessarily do it in a healthy way. And I just think that that's so normal. And I think that everyone experiences that. I also just loved 14 years old because it's a flawed outlook on life. It's it's a character who thinks they know everything, but doesn't really know everything. And so it's an easy, it's an easy way for the audience to grasp the fact that, oh, that's her view. But it's not necessarily what's true. And there's a term for it. Does anyone remember the term? a anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll look it up.
Any other questions here? I'll ask a gentleman over there. Right.
Thank you. Probably don't need that. Given the autobiographical nature of
Yes. First of all, I realized that I was closer to my mother than I'd ever been, who passed away when I was 17. I felt like it was her somehow telling me to write the book. You know, I had a lot of different feelings. So all I can say, it's a feeling, you know. Nothing I can necessarily point to in the physical world, but that it was about her. I mean, I dedicated it to her. And I think that it also helped me to, I guess doing it was the biggest gift I could have given myself. And I encourage anyone, if you're thinking about doing something creative, whether it's writing a book or doing a painting or acting or doing anything, do it, because we're here. This is it. This is what we have. This is all the time we have. I think Walter Mosley said, you know, write a page a day. You'll have 365 pages, which is a novel at the end. I mean, that's, you know, it is kind of true that it's something I think we all have in us. We're all creative beings. I think we all have the desire to create in some way, shape, or form, whether it's making a meal or, you know, working out in the gym or walking the dogs. I mean, it's sort of, we're taking in this world and trying to process it, and I think we all want to create in some way.
Yes, over here.
The only book by an equestrian I've read before is Beryl Markham's West with the Night, and she was Amelia Earhart's time frame. Have you read that, and do you have any impression of Beryl?
No, I've never read that. What was the first part of what you said? I couldn't quite hear it.
The author is Beryl Markham, Beryl, and Hemingway said she was the best author he's ever read.
Oh, I'm going to
But
read
she
her.
was an
Thank you.
equestrian in South Africa that became a contemporary and competitor to Amelia Earhart.
Wow.
But
Is it
it's one of the-
B-E-R-Y-L?
Beryl,
okay.
Markham, West with the Night.
Okay.
Amelia's autobiography is East with the Sun,
Okay.
and Beryl's is West with the Night.
I'm going to read it. Thank you.
But I can't wait to read yours.
Oh, good. I can't wait to hear what you think.
There's a lady over here. Do you have a question?
I'm so excited that I'm going to continue writing because it's the most fulfilling thing that I've found. You know, I've tried acting. It's not as fulfilling for me. I'm not saying that if somebody gave me a part, I wouldn't do it, but but writing is just, you know, something that I love to do, and I started by journaling. I did a lot of journaling as a kid into my teens, 20s, and was always writing. And then wrote some short stories that are really embarrassing, and even long stories that are really embarrassing. And then I got into screenplay writing, and I wrote a couple of screenplays, but I found that a little bit more frustrating because it's so collaborative. You know, the director then changes. And now that the book is done, if a director comes in and does his version of it, I'm fine with that. I've got the book, you know. But a screenplay that I started with, that I had, worked hard on, then got changed a lot, directors, actors, producers. That's a little harder to swallow, and I realized that I was frustrated in that, and because I wasn't a big enough name to say, oh, well, we're not going to change that. That's not going to happen. I just wanted to get it done. It was more of about, well, here's, we can actually produce this, so let's do it. But the writing a novel is a little more lonely. It's a lot more lonely. And when I got into that after the producing part, it just felt right. It just felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I don't know. It's a great feeling to have, and I hadn't really had it much.
And are you actually writing something else?
Yeah,
as
I'm
we
writing.
speak?
I'm writing another novel called Beulah, and it's set in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. And again, I picked another world that I know about. I grew up in North Carolina, I was actually in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but the Smoky Mountains are right there, the foothills, and it's set in the 80s, so no cell phones, thank goodness. That's fun. And it's a small town. Again, that's how I grew up. And a bit more of an ensemble cast or characters. And basically, like the first page, you find out that a girl in her high school's gone missing. And so it's a mystery, maybe psychological thriller. I haven't totally figured it out, but I have about 300 pages, so I'm still figuring it out.
She let me read some of it. It's awesome, absolutely awesome. So I just think that personally, I'm so glad that not only that I met you and you got to be a friend, but I'm just so glad that you are creating these beautiful pieces that you're writing and sharing with everyone, and bringing people into worlds that they would never have known about, that will impact them emotionally, and I think really help people heal and deal with change and trauma and understanding of choices and all of that, and also become passionate about horses, even if you've never met one.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jane.
So I think, we have a book signing outside. And of course, Christy you have an Instagram page, right?
I do, yes. What is it, Shannon? Oh, Cashman?
But there's
Cashman
bookmarks and everything
Christy.
out there. I'm sure if you do manage to read it, or anyone else you know reads it, and you have any thoughts about it, she would love to hear how much you liked it, or what elements, or how you were impacted by the book.
Yeah,
or you can also
absolutely.
send any of that to janeseymour.com, and I'll make sure she reads it.
Yes.
But no, I'm very excited for you all to actually experience it and realize it says YR, but it really is all ages.
YA, yeah.
YA, sorry,
Yeah,
YR.
but it's
Where did I
not,
get the
yeah.
R from? I don't know. Sorry. Young reader, no,
Young
YA.
reader, Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And I don't know, I feel like I just have the best partner in the world, and in Jane, and I feel blessed and excited. It's just been the best experience so far. I'm so excited about what's going to happen going forward.
Okay.
And just quickly, I also want to say thank you to the Nantucket Book Festival. This festival is extraordinary, and everything is just so well done. It's such a warm and inviting experience. I mean, everything about it has been so fantastic. I definitely want to be involved going forward. I hope you'll have me. As Sarah and I said, we'll have another book in 11 years. But but I definitely want to be involved. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, all of you, Talon. It's been just incredible. And, you know, I can't, I mean, I haven't done a lot of book festivals, but this is my favorite. And thank you, Shannon.
Okay, so we'll take you up
Yeah.
front and you can meet everybody.